Should the world fear China? It's the subject of a new book written by Zhou Bo, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University and retired Air Force Colonel of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. He studied at Harvard and Cambridge universities. Welcome to The Agenda. Well, your book is called Should the World Fear China? And you've said that you don't really like that question. What makes you so uneasy about that?
Actually, I like this question because, because this is a question, and it actually was raised to me by Die Zeit, one of the good German magazine, in interview to me, and I didn't expect that. The first question he asked is, Colonel, tell me, should the world fear China? I forgot what I said, but I remember the question since. And I believe this question best reflects West's attitude toward China, which is kind of uncertainty or probably also a little bit of fear. So maybe in the Chinese Taoism, it's kind of China's rise is inexorable. Is it a fortune or misfortune? So I think this is really a good question.
Who fears China and what do you think they fear?
I think the West certainly has some kind of fear, but this kind of fear is not really reflected in global South. When we talk about this, we have to bear in mind that the Western population is just 14% of the whole world's population. So when we talk about the world opinion, the view of people around the world, so basically sometimes, most of the time we're talking about how the West think about the world. But this actually should not be the case. It should be how the world would look at China. But the Western opinion, of course, really matters, especially in mainstream media. I think still it is the Western opinion that matters. But now the world has changed. It's not that I believe the world has changed, but that even according to the Munich Security Conference, which is certainly the most West-centric conference, the argument is, according to one of the themes of the report, Western less, and the conclusion is that not only is the world becoming less Western, but the world itself is becoming less Western.
It's a huge sweeping statement to suggest the global South doesn't fear China. I mean, there must be countries in the global South that you would accept do fear China, or at least are worried by China.
Well, it depends on where you are talking about. For example, in Africa, I think people, generally speaking, have a more favorable opinion of China because the Chinese people are simply working there. The Chinese are creating a lot of opportunity for them. But if you move this picture to Latin America, I would say that probably is half and half. And the most patchy picture is the Indo-Pacific. Yeah. But since the Indo-Pacific is so big, then we'll have to divide it into between regions. For example, like India. India's relationship with China is complicated. I don't believe that India really would love to see China continue to rise because India just wants to rise. And India would believe that sometimes China wants to encircle India. This is total nonsense. Why is that? China is much stronger economically, militarily. Why should we try to encircle India? That is actually narcissism in another way.
It probably doesn't feel like that on the India-Chinese border, I would suggest.
Yeah, that certainly is the most unfortunate incident, what happened in 2020 when there was a fight, a physical deadly brawl between Chinese and Indian soldiers, which resulted in the death of 20 Indian soldiers and the death of 4 Chinese soldiers. But I'm happy you actually mentioned that, because that is the only incident that we actually have since 1979, when China started reform and opened up. So you just cannot find a single example that the Chinese kill another foreigners elsewhere. But since this kind of border issue is a kind of sovereignty issue, unfortunately, the people from both sides, were determined, to safeguard what they believe to be their soil. But even in this deadly brawl, there is still something positive. That is, neither side try to kill each other, with rifles. So that means the subconscious knows that they should not shoot at each other in any circumstances, and that suggests confidence building measures in the past have actually worked.
We'll come back to China's role around the world later. I want to come back to the book. I wonder if you wish you'd held back publication and called the book "Should the World Fear Donald Trump?" I mean, as a seasoned observer of international affairs, I wonder what you make of this new world order of the past few months.
Oh, that is a fascinating question, because the question is, well, certainly takes you more than 1 or 2 months to write a book, and I believe people certainly are not so certain what he's going to do next. But here is my conclusion. We don't know what he's going to do next. But I'm pretty sure, and I believe most people would agree with me, that by the end of his second term, America's global image and the credibility will just go down. Just to see what he has done in the first months. And my argument, as I was talking to The Guardian and to quite a few for newspapers, in which I argue that the damages he did to American credibility and image within 1 month is more than the damages made by all his predecessors combined.
His supporters might well say he's put China on the back foot. No one knows what's going to happen next with the Trump administration, and that's rather unnerving to deal with, isn't it? There's no certainty.
There's no certainty, but so far, I think I'm almost pleasantly surprised to see actually he's not so hostile toward China, as all people would assume, because he talked about 60% tariff before election, which actually would reduce bilateral trade to zero. And right now, the fact is that the tariff he levied on China actually is smaller than that he levied on Mexico and Canada. So of course, the big question is why, right? And I myself have to think about that. Maybe he definitely should have learned some lesson from his first term, right? And whatever that might be, he should have drawn his own lesson. But China has also drawn its own lessons. So you can see this time how quickly China's response has been. So it's within 10 hours. So that means well prepared. So I think this time he actually would find China more difficult, to deal with if he takes China as a strategic competitor, because the Chinese economy is becoming less dependent on the United States to a lesser extent, and China certainly has dealt with him before, so China certainly, psychologically speaking, is better prepared. And I think China is also trying to reach out to many other countries, while internally we're trying to have this kind of a dual circulation. That means we not totally rely on the export market.
We'll return to Mr. Trump, I'm sure, later in our chat. The book contains essays you've written between 2013 and 2024. It's a long period in international affairs. I wonder how China has changed in that period and how attitudes towards China have changed.
Well, it's a really big question, because you are talking about a span over more than 10 years. I think during this period, I would like to highlight the two changes that I believe are most significant in China. One is how counter-piracy non-operations that doesn't seem to be that significant actually has turned the Chinese Navy into a blue water navy, because ever since the end of 2008, we have been sending Chinese flotillas non-stop to the Gulf of Aden. Well, it's not only sitting in the water, it's also about interaction with the international navies, be it combined maritime forces led by the United States, be it EU Atlanta led by European Union, or be it NATO. We still have a cooperation with NATO. So this is something that people always forget, as if this is total hostile relationship. It's not that. Then the other change is in China's diplomacy. I think China's successful mediation between Saudi Arabia and Iran would be a turning point in China's diplomacy, because in the past, when you think about China's foreign policy, I think it is more characterized with more no's, yeah, non-interference, yeah, and all this kind of no. But after that, I think China has to become more positive. Well, saying no certainly has good reasons, because non-interference in the domestic affairs of other countries, yeah, certainly is good. But then the question is, China is getting stronger, and people's expectation for it is becoming higher, and this actually is the price of a major power.
You can forgive the world, surely, for being fearful of the Chinese Navy getting so big so quickly. Do you understand that fear? As a military man, you must.
Well, I understand they are so uncertain to see a Chinese navy almost all of a sudden, overnight, has become the largest navy in terms of number of ships, right? And the question is why? Why, right? I don't believe it is totally for the question of Taiwan, because Taiwan is so close to us. It's not that Navy will just play the only role. I think if you look beyond Taiwan into the international water elsewhere, that could explain why China needs such a Navy. Because for major powers, actually they have two missions more than a small or medium power. That is, they have overseas interests, and then they have international obligations. China's overseas interests, of course, are almost ubiquitous, especially in the economic field. But now, even in the Middle East, you can see that China is involved politically and even to some extent militarily, because the areas where Chinese flotillas are operating basically is what we call the Greater Middle East, right? So that is about China's national interest. And then, with major powers comes major obligations, and that is what the Chinese Navy has been trying to do, because in escorting ships, Chinese Navy has not only escorted Chinese ships, but also foreign ships, and half of them turned out to be foreign ships. So that is actually a good example of how China has been trying to blend its own national interest with its international responsibilities.
It's a large navy for a country that preaches a doctrine of non-intervention.
Yes, but the point is, if you look at the PLA's operation overseas, they are all humanitarian in nature, be it peacekeeping, counterpiracy, or disaster relief. Being large doesn't mean that you have to be offensive, aggressive necessarily. As I said before, ever since 1979, you just can't tell me one single example of Chinese PLA killing foreigners overseas. This is miraculous for a rising power.
I'm going to move on because we have so much to talk about. China's a huge trading partner, exporter, a huge industrial country, the second biggest economy in the world. And yet it still describes itself as a developing country. Should it?
Well, I think that's a very good point. Because internationally speaking, there are no agreed definition of developing country and developed country. So it's very much up to each country as to how it would describe itself. And the Chinese government is certainly right if this whole economy is divided by 1.4 billion Chinese people. So in that regard, sometimes we even hear such saying that China will always be a developing country. But I think there is a kind of irony indeed, because even if it was the second largest economy, that is by GDP. If by PPP, we are already the largest economy in the world, right? So, and who knows, maybe in 10 years' time, we can really become the largest economy by GDP. So the question is, can a developing country be the largest economy in the world? Well, that would be weird, right? And if that can be, then what's the point of dividing countries into developed country and a developing country? The crucial point is, China really can be confusing for people, because there is an element of truth about China in all aspects. China is wearing so many hats. At the same time, China is the largest exporter, largest industrial nation, largest trading nation. But at the same time, China divided by its population is certainly a developing country. So then, of course, you are confused, which China is true. My answer is each of these China is true.
In the book, you write, China needs to overcome, and your words are, lingering victimhood in order to fulfill its international responsibilities. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I think I do believe that Chinese people need to be further educated about his own history. For example, in Qing Dynasty, when people think of Qing Dynasty, the first impression is, this is a period that we suffered most from Western aggression and invasion. That is true, but there is also High Qing, which is glorious, not only for the people of the West, but also for Chinese people. The whole Qing Dynasty is more than 300 years. So it's not that every day is so dark, every day is so rainy, and I believe it is important for Chinese people to change the mentality. Why is that? Because now you are strong. You are no longer weak. How can the strongest nation on earth consider itself as a victim, right? Well, almost there, right? So even if you are second largest economy in the world, if you talk every day about your victimhood or your humiliation, that is bizarre for me. Because when you become strong, you have to change your mentality. And you have to think how you actually could provide the public goods for other people's well-being. And this is the hope of the people around the world for China.
How do you change that mentality?
I think we need to read more. We need to see two sides of the same coin. Both are true, but I think we need to have our self-education. I think because in China, I think we have more education on patriotism, but we didn't have a lot of education on nationalism, right? So these these two things, sometimes people confuse. I think they are not the same thing.
I promised you we would return to President Trump. So let's talk about those key international relationships. And let's start with China and the United States. Since the return of Mr. Trump to the White House, I mean, that relationship appears to be difficult, to say the very least. Perhaps that would be a generous word. How do you see this relationship progressing? I know it's early days, but walk us through where it goes in the coming months and the coming years.
I don't know. Honest answer is I don't know. And I talked to so many intelligent people, and the answer is the same. They don't know. But I think it won't be too long for us to find out, because normally people would judge his administration within 100 days. So 2 months, have passed. So I think within another 2 months, more and more things will become clear. Well, he talked about how he wanted to visit China in 100 days. I don't know how true it is still, but if it comes, certainly we would have a lot of deals, so things would become much more clear. Then he also talked about how he has invited President Xi to go to visit the United States. He said President Xi will visit the United States soon. I don't know. So, but my point is, these two largest economies on earth cannot afford not to have interaction. And so, like it or not, this kind of interaction will just go on, and people will watch it. So I think things will become clear.
Trump's supporters will say that America is simply doing to China what China's done to the rest of the world in terms of protectionism and tariffs and joint ventures and the rest of it. I mean, that's a fair viewpoint, isn't it?
Well, that's a very, very complicated issue. I would argue that while China is moving in more with the international system, but Trump seems to walk away from this system that was almost tailor-made by the West. So we are seeing this kind of reversion.
He's playing China at its own game.
I think so, yeah, but how successful he can be, it really remains to be seen. But I would say that sometimes I wonder, you see, why until now he actually didn't say much about China, or he didn't do much. I think probably he's preoccupied with something else. For example, he has a pledge to resolve this war in Ukraine within 24 hours. Certainly he could not do it, but maybe this kind of bragging, might become a burden on him to spend more time on that kind of issue, or maybe he realized China is such a big white elephant in the room, so he preferred not to look at this elephant for a while, and he pretend just to look in another direction. And definitely, I believe that he would finally come back and look China in the eyes. So how long does it take? I don't know. Yeah.
Do you think that China really wants to reshape the global world order, and if so, how?
This is the largest myth about China. Yeah, China certainly would not want to change the existing international order. The only question is, what is the existing international order? The West would believe it's a liberal international order. We don't think so. And I can easily point out why the West is wrong. Because the West is wrong in that it takes all the rules and regime and even some institutions built after Second World War that are primarily found in economic field as the international order. So these rules, basically for economic development, are part of the order. The international order is much bigger. It covers, a country's political system, national identity, different religions, and above all, civilizations.
Where do initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative fit into this? Because you will be well aware that many commentators in the West see it as little more than a debt trap. It is, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. My answer to you is very simple. Because this project has actually been at least more than $1 billion US dollars. So would you just lay a trap with such huge investment? If you lay a trap, you say something, that is fine. But if for you to invest in $1 trillion US dollars to lay a trap, how can you do that? We might have made some mistakes in this proposal because we're not experienced. Anyway, this is the largest initiative in human history. So, and we are not experienced in that. So we couldn't have made a mistake here and there, but it's not our intention to lay a trap for anyone. And besides, I think generally speaking, most of the people would welcome this. Otherwise, I don't believe, for a country like Pakistan, they would have any other opportunities to revitalize the economy. Yeah. So I think basically it's an economic project. But yes, it could have a kind of a political influence, because if a project is big, it is so influential, then it creates some kind of influence. But the problem of the West is that it would portray it as a kind of political project. No, it's not. It's an economic project.
Let's talk about influence. China and Russia have described their relationship as having no limits. What does that mean in real terms?
That is very simple. It's rhetorical. It's rhetorical in that it demonstrates the goodwill of the both sides to develop this relationship. I can make it very simple to you. For example, Jamie, if I say I want to develop my friendship with you, but hang on for a moment. This friendship has to be limited. What would you say? What would you think? So this is just our kind of a portray of a brighter future. So it should not be worrying at all. I just don't understand why this word has actually caught so much attention, because just in the announcement where this very word was mentioned, it also mentioned that it's not one of our allies. And the war in Ukraine has told everybody that this is not precisely that this is not one of our allies. Yeah. Otherwise, we would have provided Russia military aid. Otherwise, we would not warn them not to use nuclear weapons.
China's critics would say to you that China has provided Russia with military aid.
No, I don't think so. Well, if they have said something like that, they should provide us evidence. I think what has provided are what they consider to be dual-use items. Yeah. So that means something that can be used militarily and also for civilian purposes. Let me just give you an example, like oil and gas. Who would consider oil and gas as something military? Yes, when it is put into the tank of a military truck. In normal situation, people would not think about these products like that, but it can be dual use in nature. So that is why, yeah, we have been providing them these kind of things, which, first of all, are just the products for civilian use.
Should China then bring its influence to bear on Moscow in this friendship and bring an end to this conflict speedily?
Well, I think probably your expectation is a bit too high. Yeah, I think China has been trying its best, yeah, to help. This is reflected in the 12-point peace plan in the beginning, and then we in China and Brazil have jointly initiated something. These are not really very successful because even President Zelensky described this kind of a joint initiative by China and Brazil as destructive. Yeah, but at least it shows that China wants to help. And I think the way that China has helped is not to throw the wood into fire. That is not to provide military assistance, for example.
When you and I sit here in 5 years' time, what will the world look like? What will the international order look like? And who will we fear? Will we still fear China?
Well, that's a good question. I think in 5 years' time, I don't know what will happen to the United States, but I believe probably it will become more chaotic. I think China will just grow further with strength because in the last few years we had some problems in our economy. But it seems that with our government paying more attention to private enterprises, these kind of things, now I believe the direction is quite right. Yeah, the only question is how fast you can go, but of course Donald Trump is there. Then, even in the West, if we just move away from China and the United States, in the West, people certainly have realized that the West seems to be in a kind of a decline, and I don't know how the whole West could be reinvigorated. For that to happen, you have to have something very big, like a lead in AI or just this kind of information technology, so on and so forth. But then I would say probably in 5 years' time, the whole West would become somehow more pacified, to become more calm in mind. And maybe then China and India, Brazil, and these different countries might sit down to have a cup of tea to talk about this world order. And people would say, okay, we have to work together.
Zhou Bo, good luck with your book, and thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
and always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project.
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.